Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to a special interview with Bhai Harjinder Singh, who is a lecturer, writer and a researcher. He has a new book which will be launching on the 28th of May. He has also written a book called Game of Love. And now we have Bhai Harjinder Singh in the studio with us on Sangat television. Bhai Harjinder Singh, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Bhai Sahab Ji, can you tell us a bit about the book that you wrote before this one, The Game of Love?
Yeah, The Game of Love, that was authored in 2000, it was published in 2008 by Akaal Publishers, and that book was written with the aim of bringing to the forefront the history of those Sikhs that had sacrificed themselves, so the Shaheeds of the Qawm. So that's the project he started with in writing the Jeevani and translating them from Punjabi into English. And what it transpired to become in the end was a book written about fighting for righteousness for Sikhs on a general basis. So rather than focusing on just the Shaheeds of the last 20-30 years, we actually changed the focus of the book from Guru Nanak and taking Guru Nanak's Bani and how Maharaj fought against Jabir, Babur and people like that. So we took it from Guru Nanak's times up to the present day and the present issues. So that was published in 2008 and we're now on our third edition for that book. And it's one of the best sellers on Amazon consistently for Sikh books.
I've read the book myself and the book was really good. The stories in the book, and it was just emotional, and I think a lot of people out there need to get hold of this book, Game of Love. It's on Amazon, and do please buy this book. But going on to reflections on 1984, which is your new book that you're going to launch on the 28th of May. Can you tell us a bit about what this book's about and how it's different to The Game of Love?
Game of Love was written for essentially a Sikh audience, for Sikhs to know their own history of their Mahan Shaheeds, so those Singhs and Singh who gave their lives, and Guru Sahibs and Sikh history on a broad basis fighting tyranny. So that's what The Game of Love was about, whereas this book is essentially aimed at the commemorations for the 30 years for 1984 and still the fight and the struggle that the Sikhs have for Sikh rights within Punjab and across the world as well. So this was written specifically to address issues which have occurred over the last 30 years and still at the forefront for Sikhs. So for example, General Brar was attacked in London, and following that General Brar came on to the Nihal show for the BBC. And from that, it's what's happened for Sikhs is, for the last 30 years, people like General Brar, because they led the army into the Darbar Sahib, they're seen as a legitimate voice of this history, but yet the Sikh voice or the eyewitness accounts are sort of seen as ineffective because they're not contained within media or within books. So what I aimed to do with this book was to actually tell the Sikh story, but also use academic resources. So we've used books and we've used Indian government papers, white papers, and we've also used even books by KPS Gill and Ribeiro, who've been actually heads of Punjab Police. So we've actually quoted those people as well, and we've written a objective account. Well, that's what the hope has been with this book. So to bring Sikh history, of the recent Sikh history and the Sikh issues to the forefront for Sikhs for the 30 years, and also the current state of Punjab, so what the state of Punjab is now. So in Punjab nowadays, 75% drug abuse within the population who are young, and 3/4 of the population in education are using drugs. So it's those sort of issues, and even alcohol. The national average for alcohol abuse in India is 26%, in Punjab it's 50% of the population.
So you've put statistics into this book of what's happening?
Yeah, so the present day statistics are included within the book, so that's what we've done. We've got the most recent resources, the sources that we could source ourselves within the restricted budgets that we have and research time that we had to write the book. So we've done that to bring it up to date and even discuss, is Khalistan still relevant for Sikhs, and what were the issues that led to a freedom struggle and even a sort of civil war against the Indian government.
Okay, thank you. So to write this book, who inspired you to write this book? What went through your mind that you have to write this book on 84?
So at the end of the book, I sort of give my reflections as an individual. So my inspiration in totality, really, in the most of it. I've had a long history with 1984 and issues related to it as a Sikh being brought up in the UK and around other Guru Sikhs involved in the movement. But in terms of writing the book and raising the voice now 30 years on, it was more by Jaswant Singh Kalra, who also got Shaheed because he raised his voice against the Indian government, and he raised the issue of disappearances of Sikhs, and he uncovered mass cremations of unidentified bodies. So by Jaswant Singh Kalra, there's videos on YouTube of him saying that even if truth gets covered in darkness, if one light's turned on and one lantern's turned on, it still challenges that darkness. So that was his struggle. So in reflection to what he did, I'm trying through the book myself to do that also.
Okay, so how long did it take you to write this book? When did you start, and then when did you finish writing the book?
The book was written in a very short time scale. In total, I say as well, because there's a lot of other people help with the research and stuff, and they've been given mentions in the book. So as Akaal publishes as the publishing house, is a team effort, and start to finish it was written in 28 days really. But other than that, so it has been a bit of a rush job, so I apologise to people who may find mistakes in it, but 28 days, within the next 4 to 6 weeks we proofread the book in the different versions.
Okay, this book still needs to be launched, so I'm hoping that you've read this before it was compiled. And
yeah, we've had different proof versions and things like that, so we've got the published copies now. People can pre-order it off Amazon or off our own website, which is akaalpublishers.com, and at the launch we'll be selling the copies at a discounted rate of $7.99, and the launch is at King's College London at New Hunt's House at the Guy's Campus, Lecture Theatre 1, from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m, and it is half term, so there is not much excuses for people who are off work that week, and they can bring their children out. It can be a family event, so we welcome anyone to attend. We've also got Dr. Gurnaam Singh on the panel. Ranjit Singh Cookie from India will be on the panel, who's been through the movement and been convicted of charges as well, come through that, and is a reformed character. We've also got Ranjit Singh Sarai, who's part of the Council of Khalistan, is also a solicitor from the UK. But Jai Singh Sahal, who's part of is a journalist, and he's also part of media projects as well. So that's the panel at the moment, myself included as well.
so what's the main difference between the two books that you've written, the first one, Game of Love, and the second one, Reflections on 1984? What are the main two differences between the two books?
Game of Love was written for specifically a Sikh audience, in the sense that I didn't go out to actually prove objectivity. So that was written for a Sikh audience to have their own Sikh history in front of them, so they can read about the glorious past of their Shaheeds. So that was written from that perspective. This is written from an objective basis, whereby I've sourced any information I've made, any arguments that are made about Santi Lal Singh's the chapter on Santi. I've also quoted their speeches. So anything that I've done in this book, it's all sourced. So if anyone does point a finger back to me, say this is factually incorrect, there's a source to back that information up or where it was taken from.
So, buddy, in 10 years' time, what impact do you think your book would have made?
The hope is that this book clarifies some of the cobwebs from the last 30 years, whereby in India in 1984 there was one channel, TV channel, called Doordarshan, and there was restrictive laws which made the media one voice. So the Indian government could interfere with what was given out to the mass media outlets. And when you look at the history around 1984, you get one view, because that was the controlled media view.
Yeah.
And now what we've done through this book, we've looked at other views, we've looked at other books that were banned as well, and eyewitness accounts, we've included those. So in 10 years' time, I hope this book will be part of the debate to uncover what actually went on, so what really happened. It's like the Jews in the Holocaust. Hitler was allowed to commit the Holocaust because he kept lying to the world to say it wasn't occurring. So he did that because he covered it up, and they even used to have inspections at the gas chambers, and they covered that up. And now with this history, it's been covered up, and people like General Barak keep coming on the media, keep saying this happened, yet all eyewitness accounts and independent research goes against what he says, or the official view says, or even the Indian White Paper as well on 1984. So the hope is that this book as a project goes to some way to clarifying that, to clarifying what really occurred.
1984, June 1984, the attack on Golden Temple was a big thing for Sikhs. It was very saddening that the government did such a thing. As we grew up, there's less and less people didn't know what was happening, what happened to the Sikhs in Amritsar in June 1984. But as I grew personally, there's more and more people talking about what happened. There's more and more people discussing. Never forget 1984. We used to go to camps, and people used to say that you should never forget 1984. And there used to be elders that used to tell us what actually had happened. So, from about 10 years ago until now, there's more and more people aware that what's happened to the Sikhs in '84 and what they went through. So, do you think that in the next 10 years we would be in a better place where we think that we'll get justice and a new government would come around to understand our pain and trying to just
See, you can take this on two views. One view is what you said is right, where over the last 10 years there's been a jagrati or awareness within Sikh youth or in the UK and also in India as well. So the Sikh youth now in India are very savvy. They're on Facebook, they're on Twitter, and they get the news immediately, so they can check sources. So that has come about with the explosion of the web and just globalization as a general issue. But in terms of the next 10 years, if someone's committed genocide against you, for them to actually admit that genocide occurred, they then have to turn around and actually pursue the criminals of those laws. And the Indian state has consistently not done that. So even in 10 years' time, unless there's a massive shift in political powers and things like that, I can't see that happening personally at the moment with the current state of affairs. In 10 years' time, what I'd hope that this book would help go towards is an intellectualisation of our Sikh youth and masses as well, to say that this is what actually occurred. And when some Sikh goes on to the BBC Asia Network, even these Sikh channels, Sangat TV, whatever it may be, there's an intellectual debate which is backed up with sources. So rather than saying this is what I think, it's actually backed up with information and facts and data. So that's the hope of the book, to add to that sort of education process. But in terms of getting justice and freedom, the last stage, there's 8 stages of genocide. And the last stage of genocide is actually denial. Now the Indian government is denied that these things occurred. Operation Woodrose occurred after 1984, after the Bar Sahib attack. And Woodrose, the Indian army went out and actually arrested Amritsars across Punjab. And they jailed them and they beat them as on, tortured them. That happened. That's down in sources. And after that, then Delhi occurs, where Indira Gandhi gets assassinated and Sikhs were massacred. At least 10,000 across India, if not more. So even those genocides where they, even on the back of my book, I've quoted Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, and he's expressed an apology, but then after that, for 7 years, there's been no delivery of justice. So there's still a denial within that system that these things occurred, or that the Sikh bogey of terrorism or extremism was dealt with in the right way. So I've got KPS Gill in the book, or Ribeiro, and they're quoted as saying, yes, we went out and mass killed because it was a warlike situation. But then you've got the police officer saying we went outside the law that they're employed to uphold. So how we could get justice, I don't personally think at the moment, in the current state of politics in India, we would get justice, because that's a massive political change. It's like if you look at the IRA and Northern Ireland, they actually had agreements to say we've ended our hostilities and this is our agreement to take us forward. Whereas with Sikhs in the Punjab, where's our agreement with the Indian government to say hostilities have occurred, we'll end those hostilities, you release Rajwana, Buller, Hawara, and we will now take the peaceful path. But that hasn't occurred, where you've got Kishori Lal and people like that who've killed Sikhs in Delhi when the Delhi massacres occurred in 1984, and Kishori Lal was imprisoned for a life sentence and subsequently released, early release, and then his sentence was also quashed and his license for life. So whereas similar par cases like Rajwana, that's not occurring for the Sikhs. Even what Bhai Gurbaksh Singh did as well, his whole movement about getting people released who already served life sentences, we still can't see no light at the end of the tunnel. So I think there's a lot of political shift to occur still in Punjab, but as Sikhs now, we should really look at focusing on rebuilding in Punjab, rebuilding the Sikh faith and the foundations of the faith in Punjab, helping Sikhs to get back and sort of taking away partly from the politics.
in Punjab, there's a lot of drugs and there's a lot of alcohol that's been spread throughout Punjab. That the youth in Punjab, they don't talk about Sikhi anymore. They've got no Sikhi at all. Where people in Europe or in other countries, they're doing prachar and they're doing all of these different rallies and to do with Sikhi, but in Punjab there's very less people from the youth that they've got nothing to do with Sikhi anymore. They're all on drugs and it's becoming really bad. So how do you think that would help in Punjab? How can the youth in Sikhi families come together and just become strong?
If you look at Sangat Singh and his life, Sangat Singh's message was very simple. Kes rakho, naam japo, amrit chako. That's what his initial message was. People look at the political speeches, but if you look at his dharm prachar, he was a dharmic hasti, because they're Sant Mahaburk. Now, while his prachar was very simple, get people back to the basics of Sikhi, and that's what should be happening with Punjab. It doesn't matter what Jathebandi it is, what organisation, we should support everyone to get back to those basic roots. So in terms of the Punjab situation now, water in Punjab water is now polluted. Every house in Punjab, most houses now have a filter because you no longer can drink the water without it being filtered. So it's even simple issues like that. Our water's filtered now. If we don't have a filtered water, we might fall ill. It's not potable. In 10 to 20 years, Punjab might even be a desert because they've used so much of the water resources. So there's massive issues in terms of education as well. Boys are generally not educated, girls are in Punjab, but that causes a disparity between the sexes as well. 60% of all drugs which are rescued by the police or the Indian government are found in Punjab. Now people might say, well, it's a border state, but Gujarat's a border state and so is Rajasthan, yet those states don't have those same problems. So also on top of that, Punjab is still economically one of the most performing states, but its growth has decreased more recently, and the investment from the Indian central government is going into other states. So the reliance on Punjab is decreasing day by day. And so Sikhs as a Qawm, from what I've learnt within the book and my own experiences, we need to get back to the basics of Sikhi and start doing prachar and support any organisation, doesn't matter who, which Jathebandi or what group they're affiliated with, and get back to that and address these social issues which are ruining our future. And that's for Punjabis and Hindus, Punjabis who are Hindus and Sikhs in Punjab. It's for all Punjabis. Punjab is in a state of affairs which is each successive government that's come in after 92 has gone about actually not developing Punjab. They've developed it in pockets which are around capitalism and monopolies, and those monopolies don't deliver for general Punjab masses.
So from where I can see the prachar in the UK, because I've been born and bred here, so the prachar here is a lot. There's a lot of prachar about Sikhi. There's a lot of camps that are happening throughout the year for different ages, and there's loads of Kirtan programs that are come, loads of samagams, there's 40 days jobs. So there is a lot of job, and there's a lot of programs for youth to come and join. But in India, because I'm not from there, so do you know if there's anything that's happening for the youth, for them to come and join in the Sangat, or to even have a discussion with older lot of people where they can be educated about Sikhi and what's happened?
There's similar organisations also in Punjab or across India. What you find in India is Sikhs who are outside of Punjab are more jagrat about their Sikhi and they'll keep their case. It's the Punjabis who are the worst ones who won't keep their case, who are actually being nashy and things like that. So Sikhs outside of Punjab, you go to places like Delhi or Bombay as well, they won't cut their hair at all. They're quite strict. Even in Haryana, I go to Haryana very regularly. So they're very strict. But in Punjab, you have got similar things like Gurmat camps. So the Namjit Akaal or Sangs affiliated with the Akaal or even a Akhand Kirtan Jatha, they do prachar within their pockets of prachar, but it's very small and low level. So that is occurring. Even Akaal Purki Fauj as an organisation which is sort of led and sort from sort of missionary sorts, but they still do a lot of prachar even if it's about at the start. So there is organisations out there, but it's very low level prachar. It's not on a Panthic wide level. So you might get like Sant Ranjit Singh doing divans where you might get 10,000 people, but it's not a personal, close That's where Sant Jalal Singh, by Father Singh, they started close-knit prachar at a grassroots level through Harjinder Singh's All India Sikh Students Federation. All India Sikh Students Federation. They did local college to college universities prachar. So that network got completely decimated in the 80s, and those youth who would have been the future lights, they all got shaheed. So there's a gap in the population as well. There's a disparity because those people, they should have been now in their 40s or 50s. See, I was 6 years old when 84 occurred. So those people 10 years older than me would have been 16, but they're no longer here. So there's a whole gap in that population. There's even places in Gurdas where people can't find boys because of the disparity of the shaheeds that occurred in the level of shaheed in those districts. So there's that going on. But just to bring my thoughts to a close, I think Sikhs just need to help. We've got money here in the West. What we do is we go back to India and we sort of be very judgmental on the Punjabi Sikhs to say, you're here in Punjab and all you want to do is go out. But they've got no future in Punjab. What can they do? That's their way out, and that's their ticket out. Because they need to be economic immigrants because they've got no future in Punjab. So that we need to, as Western Sikhs, is not go there and build kotiyan which have just got cobwebs in them. Because that doesn't do anything for the Punjabi people. You're better off paying for one nalka or even someone's board, which might cost 40 to 60,000 rupees. But we're not doing that. Even on a family level, we can do that and help out. And that will help the Punjabi economy. And also, the God that are even keeping a granthi who keeps his red and doesn't get drunk. In Dwaba, which a lot of Sikhs from the Birmingham area are from, it's a nightmare. You won't find Kesatari Sikhs in a pen, children, even one Kesatari Mundao. And then you've got granthis and things who drink alcohol, who don't keep their earth as well. So that prachar can't happen in that area because the jera head prachar da granthi jera pend da o aap khanda pinda ho ki karuga ki se doga agle nu. So there needs to be a coming back to basics of Sikhi to teach the population and then educate them, and then through that you'll get the Jagrati as well, social evils and things like that getting addressed. But it's no longer about fighting for freedoms on a basic commie level now. It's even just helping the people to get their normal everyday needs addressed, and that's what the Anandpur Sahib resolution was about. It was an economic paper as well. It wasn't just a Sikh paper, it was about economic needs of the Punjabi people. And even when you look at the Declaration of Khalistan, that was also an economic sort of almost a communist manifesto to an extent. I'm not saying it was a communist thing, but it was written very left wing and about helping the masses and even introducing a minimum wage and things like that. So that was in the Anandpur Sahib resolution. But even the Declaration of Khalistan is about helping your everyday people. And what's happened is, in Indian politics, you only get elected usually if you've got money and you've got power. So the poor person doesn't get represented.
No.
Who was Sangat Singh? He was a normal Jimidar. He was a poor person who rose to fame because he hit a call with the people who were like him. And that's the only sort of people who read any revolution. If you look at any revolutions in the world, they're usually poor people who've left their home on earth and actually fought for something that they believe in. So it's that level of prachar that needs to be occurring.
Bhai, there's a lot of prachar happening through films. There's 2 films coming out this year on 1984. What are your thoughts and views on prachar through films?
I think it's a great tool because you get to the masses. So through the cinemas, you can get to a wider audience. So even the Hindu Qaum as a Qaum, Ramayana and Mahabharat were a massive thing when they were made, especially the Mahabharat. It was huge. It was even shown on the BBC here.
Yeah.
And just through that, it's brought a massive Jagrati in their Dharam. So for us as well, we're sometimes a bit restricted because we say we can't use Guru Sahib and things like that. But films are a way forward for us now as a Qaum as well. So I'm not saying we should necessarily depict Guru Sahib, but there needs to be more sochini around that, using any medium that we can to do prachar. So it is a really good thing that's occurring.
Reflections on 1984. This is a book which will be selling on akaalpublishers.com and also on amazon.com. Bhai, thank you for joining us on Sangat Television in the studio today. Hope your book's a great success and we shall see you soon. Thank you for joining us on Sangat Television. Keep watching and supporting Sangat Television. Thank you very much. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Akaal Publishers humbly presents the launch of their next book, Reflections on 1984 by Harjinder Singh. It discusses the impact of the events of 1984 and the last 30 years. The book launch will include a seminar and a panel debate with prominent Sikh activists and intellectuals. The launch will be held on Wednesday, 28th of May 2014 between 1 p.m. and 4 p.m. at King's College, London. To book a ticket, please ring 07548 624 592 or sign up to the event at www.eventbrite.co.uk searching for Reflections 1984.
Radhe ka